rights come up. He was the son of the Reverend Timothy Wright, the godfather of gospel, the co-founder of Grace Temple Bible. He was ordained to pastor in 2009. I learned this, it was the same year that his father was. And he's held the New York Fellowship Mass Choir ever since. He named his record label after his father's nickname, Godfather Records, a direct tribute to his father's passing. So we'll be in 3 acts of this conversation. The first act is what do you feel like? Now, closing this first one, thank you so much, all of you, for being a part of this. All of you carry anointing, legacy, and grace that's been uniquely assigned to you because of where you're situated. But also, if you're in the room as well, as we're listening and learning, see that legacy is yours also. As we're a community, and some of you are forming your own legacies. So for the group, before any of you knew what your family name meant to the outside world, in your home, what did it just feel like inside the house? What did it feel like inside the house growing up? Not the legacy, the feeling. To anyone like this.
Thank you so much, Pastor Latino. Thank you so much, being a mentor family. For me, it's very simple. What it felt like in Harlem, in my household, was going to vote every election day. No matter what the election was, it could have been president, it could have been a borough president, it could have just been first judge. The whole family was going out to vote together. And it was important that we all did that. And it was 6 o'clock when my mom was home from work. My dad would make sure the schedule was clear. I was home from school, whatever basketball or sporting event I was doing. I was done and I was going with my family.
Well, Sister Ashley, what was it like? I have a co-person point of privilege because we went to high school together. What was it like for you? Your fathers were active in media and news. What was it like growing up in Reverend Charlotte's high school and Reverend Catherine's high school as well?
First, I must acknowledge our children of the Lord, Reverend Dr. W. Franklin Richardson, who's in the building. And this man, here in the Lord, and after Black Network, we can honor and give honor to you. Right next to his legacy. So in my household, it was always this. I was a quiet sharp in those who've been around since I was a little girl. I was always a bit of my own child. But we were always busy. We always 3 to 4 churches we had to go to grab on Sunday. We always had to be at church. My mother is a member of Canaan Baptist Church. Our children, our first children, were everybody to Walker as a pastor. And we were always there, either for usher rehearsal, choir rehearsal, dance rehearsal, and something so we always at church or doing something in the movement, attending a rally with dad, supporting somehow. I didn't really understand exactly who that was when I was little. But I knew he was somebody, and he was always a bunch of people who wanted him or pulling at him or he had to do something. It was never a reference moment, it was never a quiet moment. Until we kind of crafted that time out. But it was always this, just for how we kind of take the fascination that we had there.
Amen. What did it feel like? Well, I grew up, me and my right family, we grew up in the projects in Brooklyn, so it was hot. Because we couldn't control the heat, yeah, but other than that, the feeling was just bad. Because everything that my father was outside, we never let that go inside of the house. So it was just, I mean, we didn't know how great he was. We didn't know he was the man that got the big piece of chicken. And knowing that when we got older, we realized who he was. But as kids growing up, he just kept simple, kept family, so that he wouldn't grow up with any kind of big headedness or anything like that. So it just felt like that.
That's good. Can we get that? So maybe we have the picture of the person in here, but that's what that bird said, that's gonna be a big piece of chicken, right? But just, I don't know, actually, with your father, it was like, growing up, you both had to oh, no, I'm.
The feeling was, love and security. My father, who was often on the borderline, made sure that his family was proud. So I learned early on in the household that the most important things about doing his family. My mother made sure that he understood the mission that Daddy was doing. Daddy was leaving because he loved us so much, but he would be when we needed him. So there was a sense of love, to learn relationships. And I was always felt warm to me. And I learned what being submissive looks like. That submissive does not mean not a God. Because my mother was submissive to my father. But if she was unhappy, the whole house was unhappy. I learned that she's the most powerful person in the family. As powerful as that was in the nation, it came to that house. My mother was in charge, but I am so grateful. I understood very early that I had a responsibility because the advantages and exposures that I had when I was doing. So service is at the center. Felt like service is just part of life. I know service. I just do. This is what we do. It was all love. It was demonstrations of relationships and a big family, being pastor, son, the whole church was my family. I had a whole bunch of aunts and uncles, and everybody was parenting me and protecting me from my parents.
Amen, let's give that a hand. You know, if you listen to this conversation, there are nuggets for all of us in this room to grasp. I sense some of you may be parents or grandparents or even a person of legacy in yourself, and you're thinking about how do I do family so that it's workable, right? And so I'm thanking all of you for these tremendous answers. Tremendous. So it's with the exception for you and Brother Riley, most of us on this stage grew up in a church. Okay. But you grew up in a kitchen. Okay. And that kitchen fed Malcolm X. That kitchen fed Robert. Yes. That kitchen fed Reverend Malcolm. And that kitchen fed crack addicts in the 80s. Yes. All out of the same building on 126. My question is, what do you understand or did you understand about your family's purpose growing up that took the rest of the world years to recognize?
Ooh, well, I'm gonna roll right into what may not have been apparent to a lot of folks when they came to the restaurant. They might have first saw, my grandfather's fancy car on the sidewalk. But what they did see right away was that we were a hard-working family. Like you all up here, we are in the service industry. So it's like, yeah, the glitz and glam of all the celebrities coming into the restaurant and the politicians and our stakeholders. But at the core, we knew, and my grandmother made sure that we understood a motto. And that motto is that we have God, so it's faith, then family, business, and community. And that's exactly how we were raised. I don't consider myself to have been raised in my home. I was raised in that restaurant. That's where I learned what it meant to whom much is given, much is required. And whatever you needed, you worked for it. Whatever you wanted, you worked for it. When you saw someone that needed something, whether they were hungry and didn't have the means to pay, you fed them. If they needed a cup of water refilled, we did that too. And most importantly, we knew that the community was looking to us to see or giving them information on how they could carry on their legacy. So that's what it is. That purpose was always there.
It's interesting, Bishop, you met Joshua, and if I may, I know you may be with also, but I believe I did see the Archbishop, Matthew Coffey, you guys there. God for the relationship our families had. The truth that it was the first time I realized your name next to people.
Yeah, so thank you so much, just to everyone. But the first time I realized it is when my name would enter the room before I did. People would know who my dad was, they know who my mom was, but they didn't know me, and I didn't know them. And they would come to me and share the testimony about how the Lord spoke a prophetic word through my dad to them, and it came to pass. And I'm sitting there thinking, I said, do you even know my name? You know, but it's something that I begin to kind of feel the weight of when I can really understand my name entered, my last name entered the room before they knew my first name. Let's give that a hand.
That's so wow. Do you know our name? There's a difference between falling into your legacy and choosing. Was there a specific moment where you made an actual decision to carry your legacy forward? Or was anyone on the panel? Was there a decision moment where you said, you know what, I'm going to embrace this and carry it forward?
I had a couple of, I think it was something I had young when I saw, my favorite superhero was Superman. Right, so I'm watching Superman, we all like cartoons, and growing up, my dad said everything was devil, comics was the devil, art was the devil, something moving was the devil, when I think it was the devil, everything was the devil, I just didn't think about stuff. And so when you look at how I was, but I was trying to figure it out, he's trying to figure this Christian thing out, how to be father thing out, and so at 12 years old, I remember seeing one of the kids that I grew up with hanging out, my father got saved. To a message, but that was because man, it's amazing. And saw my dad in a way that I didn't see growing up. Because what took me to his dad, to get his, had achieved all this other things. I'm like, this is my dad. You know, I was doing, you're not my son. He's my dad, right? So I still got to be reminded of the stuff that he's done. So it was a light shine. And I saw the overcall. And what I saw was this man being, prayed for. I said, wow, this household was just changed by the virtue of the message that my dad just spoke. And I said, I want to do that. I want to help people because I saw the sun shine. And I said, listen, and he said, you don't understand what this is happening in my household, what this means. If you come to find out, there was abuse in our household, where verbal, physical, and just in that instant, that man changed. And it did the Holy Spirit. I said, man, they can't help people. But it's the same prayer. It's been right, you don't have to say, this is the Lord's changes. And I said, this is the person I want to follow. Jesus Christ. Because when he enters in this change, transformation, he said, do you know what the worst? Right? They're not considered the church, because they're not considered the church. Right? This was a considered church. This was a considered church. And so I said, I didn't live in the church. And then I saw the younger generation, and I'm not super deep. People like, so I won't say that God speaks to me always in the lower voice, but he said, if you want to affect change, you gotta do like I do from the inside out. I said, okay, then include him. And I saw you do it, and it was good.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing this. Your word might be the thing that transforms someone's life.
Let's go to Ashley and then to Tremendous, and then we'll continue.
So, to run from everything sharply, I used to run. You know, I was at every rally, love my parents, my mother and my father, but I just wasn't interested. I always wanted to be my own person. I even though I didn't know what that was. I was up until the death of Trayvon Martin, same book. He was killed by one of the police officers. Basically because he was in the wrong neighborhood according to him at that time. And I was so frustrated, I didn't understand how the person responsible, well, his name was George Zimmerman, how Zimmerman can get off, basically, with no comment. My whole life, whether from the front line, man, so many people, Dr. Richardson, NAACP, everybody was outside doing so much. And I didn't understand how Trayvon couldn't get justice, because the story was so simple to me. He didn't do anything. Like, you didn't have to audacity to taking his life and you don't have to be held accountable. It was simple. So I was frustrated. I became frustrated with hearing from the leaders. I was frustrated with the movement because it was just like, why is this? It's like 1 + 1 = 2. Of course, we know about racism and justice system, but it still didn't make sense to me. And that burning desire, and then I couldn't go to sleep in the main state. And then we went to the studio. After it was announced that George Zimmerman was not going to be there. I remember like yesterday, we just left the Butler screening, which was an intense film to give us the Butler, right? So all of the emotions we had. Reverend Brown didn't get a second, he got me, they called him to say they could come to the studio to report on him. So I looked and I was just like, you didn't get a chance to wait it, because he was helping to lead the fight with the family when Tony made the He didn't get a chance to swallow it, to go straight to the news and speak about it on here and represent the people, represent whatever he felt. And as he was walking, I will never forget it. I don't even know if he would. As he was walking to go take his seat, we were going to sit out crying. In the back, I don't know where it was. But as he took his seat, he kind of stumbled. And I noticed that I was like, he needs help. He needs help. With that, it was an urgency I needed to help him. Yeah, right. Not only to help him, but to help protect him from all that he was facing. I then began to understand his care and basically recognize not only the power of his blood, but what he represented and all the weight on his shoulder. But in that, my anger for what was going on, the injustice, that also, there was an urgency for me to organize. I no longer just wanted to bring and attend about it, I wanted to help organize about it. I wanted to help bring younger voices to the issues. I was like, we were having the undercity march, and it was like, we need more young, so we need to help make organize young, so we organized March Rock. And that basically it became part of my calling to help organize for our people in the way that I do. I'm not going to be the next person, I'm Charlotte, I don't do it the same way, but I do have an urgency to help organize and make things better for our people. So that's it.
Listen, I watched Ashley grow up coming in a restaurant, so I'm just really, I just have to say that from here. You know, the legacy finds a way to make a space in your life, you know, your foundation. It's something as natural as breathing. And for me, I would have to say, I've always felt really responsible for the restaurant. My grandmother made it very clear, you know, that's all we want. Everything is, the restaurant. And you all may see it as a building, but to us, it's a family unit. You know, it's a family member, it's living and it's breathing. And when I left the family nest to go to college and I came back home, it was the early 90s, and I was working in the music industry. And I noticed how business deals were happening in different strategic partnerships and marketing and all of these deals. And I was like, well, wait a minute, you know, these artists, yeah, they're good, their music is good, but my grandmother, you know, she needs to be out there. She needs some marketing partnerships and some deals. And it was in that moment when I just picked up the phone and called a really large company and said, hey, this is who we are. And I think that you should endorse us. You should sponsor us. Let's partner. And they said yes. And it took off. And it was a huge marketing deal for my grandmother, and she always reminded us that what we were doing, it wasn't just for us. You know, folks would always say, oh, well, come out to Harlem. At one point, it was just so kids. There was no other option. But as other options came about, she mentored those people. And watching her build community is something that I was really in awe of. And I knew that I wanted to not only emulate that, but take it to the next level. How can I take this foundation that I've been blessed to have and multiply it? And I'm really thankful that, you know, I found my purpose, and it makes room for that foundation to make sure that not just Sylvia's, but other restaurateurs, Black businesses, that they have the tools necessary to create a long-lasting legacy.
We are all, we are panelists, we are deaf, you all are strong, so we could look at the time clock. And we all work together, the time is a little bit off, and so everyone having a good time here. Moving us along, you all have been tremendous, and thank you for your listening. David passed away, excuse me, your father passed away in 2009. And then you ordained pastor of this church in that same year. The church where both of your parents were founders and co-pastors. Is why you're going. You named your label after his nickname, Godfather Records. Most people would have needed years just to breathe. How did you lead while you were still mourning? And what did carrying his work forward teach you about what he was actually doing?
Thank you for that. Well, it's something that we call leading while leading. So while I'm still yet leading, I'm still leading a congregation through transition. Not only losing because my father had in place, if anything would have happened to him, that my mom would have blessed, but we lost the word at the saints. So I was the only one there that could take over the ministry. So I put my feelings and my hurt and my pain to the back burner to do what God needed me to do for that season. And I thank God he been with me for 17 years. He's been with me. When I leave my everything that I see all that my father could do while he was here, so we can't let this go to grade. 40 years of gospel music, 850 gospel songs, trouble mass over. We were the Lord's side, coming out of my life, you know. We get to let this go to grade. We can keep this going. We can keep going. And to carry the legacy, what I realized, he is me and my four brothers. We carried it together, but he did it by himself. And what a man. So I realized how much it took out of him to continue to travel and come back in time to learn to do all these things and write songs, not just for him, but write songs for all of us to get and get out of the tribulations that we're in. So I realized how hard a worker he is. If he was still here, I'd be right back on the Lord with him. God had his timing, and he had me in place to do what I needed to do.
There are people that are artists who are working for grief and feelings, which we said maybe a 30-second prayer for those in the audience who are working through a particular season in their life.
Yes, Father, I pray right now for those that are dealing with bereavement right now. We don't understand why you do what you do, but we trust you in everything that you do. We know that you are God that does devastate news. You devastate all. So everything comes in your companion and in your deliverance. So I ask that you comfort us, comfort our hearts even now, knowing that we can't bring them back to us, but we can certainly go where they are. In Jesus' name we pray. Thank God. Amen. Amen. Appreciate that, Josh.
The Z connection lives within the house that your father and mother built, Zoe Ministries. But it's also a new expression, something you and Prophet Jessica built together for a new generation. What has it taught you about your own calling to build something within a legacy rather than just a character?
Thank you for the question. So there's a couple of things that come to mind. The first thing that comes to mind is a collection of essays written by W.E. Du Bois in 1903 called Stories of Black Folks. And I love inside of that essay, there was a chapter or essay that he wrote called Striving, or Our Spiritual Striving. And one of the things I love about that book, Mr. Lorenzo, is that each chapter, it starts with a musical annotation of Negro spiritual. The chapter of Our Spiritual Striving literally starts out with Nobody Knows the struggle that I've been through. And I thought of this idea because in that chapter, the core idea that Du Bois kind of explains for us is dual or double consciousness. Now, this is not a foreign idea for us as Black people in America, because what he denotes simply is that Black people have one way in which they are, which is dignified as an individual, but then they have another way in which they have to survive being unseen, or they have another way that they have to, how can I say it, switch tones, Minister Lorenzo here, to accept the expectations of the culture that we live within. And so I hope that I'm here because how do I get to be 100% God called me to be? And this is something I had to ask my dad about. And I thank God for my father, the Archbishop, Master Prophet. Can we get the Lord in there? But I had to go to Minister Lorenzo, I know the time is ticking, but I had to go to him and I asked him, I said, can I be 100% of who I'm called to be? God has made me while still reflecting you. And I'm complete.
Let's get back to
Your father, Reverend, please excuse me.
No, it's after you. It's the father. They weren't around.
So your father sent you to Long Island for 10 years before you got to Maine. You built a campus, you built yourself, and in September of 2025, he places the role on you in front of 40,000 people in a church that he built up for his Lord. What was going through your mind in that moment? And what do you think your father was feeling that he did not say to you?
What was going through my mind, we look for it, we ask for it, and then when we get there, questions are, do we really want this? So what's going through my mind is, do I really want this? And I don't think. People ask, what do you do about your legacy? I said, well, I believe that my dad's legacy is secure and my legacy will be built.
Well said.
Right? And often we get criticized for the fact that we are here where we are because of our fathers. Then it became a narrative within the Black community that you gotta build your own bones, you can do what you gotta do it. Because the narrative of not receiving a legacy has been becoming normal, right? It's been normalized. I'm gonna get a legacy from my parents, I'm gonna get this, I didn't understand it, I criticize somebody who's getting a legacy. And I said, man, no, I am ready for this. And Lord, thank you for me having shoulders to stand on. Because now I'm ahead of the game and no longer have to start from scratch. And that's how it should be for the next generation. If we're willing to do this for the Black community, we gotta start building legacy. We gotta build a it's just something as a role they like that as you watching this stuff and because right the whole idea is where legacy and destiny meet and not compete but meet. So my destiny is the legacy like my group said. And so when we talked afterwards, I didn't know what he was thinking. He said, I went back to Ecclesiastes and I realized that my fair tribulation was He said, ask the question about everything that he's built, everything has big accomplishments, masters of his vault of everything, whether it's been financial to his exploits and things like that. And the question is, what happens when was this all or not? Is this gonna fail and fall? He said, so that was some of the tension. He said that when I saw the anointing of God in life, he knew that it was in the right hands. And so he was able to place his rope on my back without any concerns, be confident. And then the other thing is, he said, I was able to do it and still be here to help continue the journey. And for that person,
expeditiously, we have just a few moments, but Reverend Richardson, you have inherited and taken a ginormous, I would say, legacy, which your father has built and done in ministry and affordable housing. So now you're in Florida, continuing the work. What is it like to build still within your father's work, but also carving out your own place in a new location? How do you stand under the weight of giant?
Stand home. Stand alone, yes. They're strong enough to understand. I think that talk a little about when you think about what is his legacy. Like, you know, that question when did you decide to take the legacy? Legacy is something, I think it's more nuanced than one moment, right? That's again, there's no about such a call. He was home on the sidewalks, taking ministry in Florida. But I'm still answering the legacy call, right? Because it's bigger than just my family or my father. To continue his legacy, as Ashley said, it's about the people that we serve. And so all of us in this room have responsibility to carry legacy forward. So as long as the mission is clear, then I know I'm going to carry the legacy going forward, whether I'm in the kitchen, in the courtroom, or in the pulpit. That legacy is how you create the legacy that is left is how you care about. I was naked and you killed. I was not when you gave me house. I was sick and you came to visit me. And so the legacy, the moment that I decided to carry the legacy is when Ashley invited me to be on this panel. I was still in the process. And you'll perpetually be in the process of answering the call, how do I move the legacy forward? The answer to that is not how many people that serve me, but how many people I serve.
You gotta run, I want to shout, but you gotta run. George, you have inherited, you represent one of the strong families in New York. I can think about hearing about your father, grandfather, my father, my grandfather. What would you say about the journey to get here? Did you want to be involved in politics? Did you see it as a calling? And then what would you say to us, a captive, we don't have enough of us in politics? Very quickly, what would you share with us?
Very quickly, I'll share. I got my start in politics officially, but I always say that I was born with a petition and a piece of literature in my hand. And you got to pay the bills like that, and no one's paying the bills like that, get out of the people. So after that, I was got a phone call to manage the city council campaign of a gentleman named Yusef Salam. The mayor's campaign had the pleasure of him winning, which was a real moment for the country. And then I had the honor of being chief of staff, and then had the pleasure to run for office myself. I think it's important for all of us to know that you always have to look forward to the next step. And whether that's me running for office, whether that's someone you don't know in school, whatever the next step may be, it's important, it's imperative to always see what that is. So, I thank my father for, having the opportunity to bring stuff to the city to allow me, and so I did the manage the campaign, even though I will say this part of the story, I don't think you know. My dad didn't know I was managing that campaign for the first 2 weeks I was doing it.
And we're going to go over time, wanting to get out of here very quickly. There's someone in this room right now who did not grow up with a famous last name. No dynasty, no institution behind them. Maybe they're the first in their family to need something, to build something, to walk through a door that nobody in their family has ever opened. They can sit in here listening to this conversation, and somewhere in the back of their mind, they can wonder, is legacy something that I can have? I want each of you to speak directly to that person in 15 seconds, please. What do you want that person to know that they're complete?
Echoing what Pastor Will said earlier, legacy is not necessarily being someone's child. It's basically about what you leave behind. So everyone has the opportunity to do something, to leave something behind. We started off talking about just Jesse Jackson. His real name wasn't Jackson. But he ended up, through his consistency, his hard work, his dedication, changing what Jackson meant to the world. So it's up to you to define what your name means, not from what your father and mother gave you, but what you.
Forgiveness, we're gonna do with this time, my conference, panel, and your 2 minutes over time. I don't know what the logistics are, right? So I need to be respectful to the house. And so thank you all to the panel, thank you to Sharp, thank you, Reverend Alan Sharpton.
Please take your seats. Please take your seats. The program is going back. Please take your seats. As we move to the next part of the program, please come in the front and take your seats. As we move on to the next part of the program, now please take your seats. As we move on to the next part of the program. Everybody take your seats. One of the things that I'm happy with, in this conference, it keeps evolving. And one of the things that I got a call, we've been very, very involved, interested in how we build Black economic wealth. And one who has mastered that is John O'Brien. And John O'Brien said, I heard what y'all are doing. And he says, if y'all can be, what time are we ending? I said, well, we're going about
6:30 or so. He said, if y'all can let me do a half hour, I'll be here by 6:15. I want to address and go through a whole session on Black wealth. So I want to do that, and before we break at 7, for our chapters, so John Hope Bryant will be here this evening, so y'all know. Tomorrow morning here early, and you know, Kamala Harris is speaking early. So don't come to me right here at 11 and ask what she said. But I'm going to come up and tell you and keep going on something. And we're going to have John Hope after I do the next 2 fireside chats, which are very important. And I appreciate you that have been staying all day, and you that are coming in the afternoon and act like you did. Our next guest is a powerhouse leader who knows the fight for civil rights is Assembly United Front. As the president of Human Rights Campaign, he leads 4 million members to one of the most critical chapters in our history. She's Noah, she's a great strategist, and the daughter of the movement, and she's here to discuss how we build a blueprint for victory in 2026. Let us welcome to this platform Kelly Robinson of the Human Rights Campaign. Kelly, I was glad that you accepted to be here and that you're here. Because if we are going to win this battle of saving democracy in this country and of salvaging civil rights, voting rights, we're going to have to do it even if we have to reach across lines that are outside our safe or comfortable zone. And I think that what I've challenged a lot of us, even in the Black church, that we've got to not be sectarian when they're after all of us. And I've said on the side of those that need LGBTQ groups or women's groups, they've got to be ready to reach back and deal with Black churches and other institutions, nationalists that may not in the past have been relational with them. You have decided that. You've reached out and you've been ready to deal with people that have even been rhetorically negative for these kind of lines to talk about that.
Well, first I have to say how grateful I am to be here. The only one that's happier to be here than I am is my mother. I told her the Reverend how Sharpton invited me to something. She was timid. Exactly that. You know, when you look across the movement right now, it's not that we are reaching into communities that we don't know. We are talking about our community. I'm a Black queer woman that grew up in the South Side of Chicago at St. Sabina's Church, a Black Catholic church. Okay, come on, Chicago. Alexis Johnson, who leads Planned Parenthood, is a woman of deep faith, running the largest organization in the country. She read something out of Presley, same story. And I think that that's an important thing to know, that right now, at this moment, where our democracy is in crisis, the people who are leading it, some of the most prominent, not just civil rights organizations, but progressive organizations in the country, from nonprofits to the halls of Congress, are Black folks, maybe Black women. I think that that makes it a fundamentally different story. But part of the reason why I'm particularly proud to be here today is when I came out and talking to my mother, when I came out, we thought that I would lose my connection with my Black church. We thought that there were many members of my family that would say, we love her, but we don't know if we're ready for that yet. But it was precisely here that I learned what it meant to be a part of a movement that was big enough to move past things that we don't understand. And I think in this moment, when we look at what our opposition's doing, the same people that are trying to stop us from teaching the history of slavery in schools are banning books that feature LGBTQ+ lives and experiences. The same people that are trying to destroy Sunday souls to the polls are the ones who are motivating laws in Kansas trying to remove people's driver's licenses simply because they are trans. So there's one of two ways we can go about it. We can understand that our fates are intertwined, or wait while they pick us off one by one, and roll back the civil rights, not that we've gained in the last 10 to 15 years, but the rights that we've gained in the last 400 years. That's a proposition in front of us.
And I think, and you know, last night we honored the Billy Porter, who was very open about his black community.
Very.
And he addressed it in very profound and profane language. But we got the point. And I think that, again, I don't come down on anybody's decisions on what they believe, but I think that it is hypocritical to act like we have not always had to deal with this in our community. I very openly with consent talk about how my sister, when my father left, was only me and my sister and my mother. My sister was gay, is gay. She's still with us since I was a kid. And one of the reasons I think that I was more open than a lot of my colleagues in the movement and in church is that my mother never, ever looked at my sister differently. When she would get her girlfriend, she let them come and have family dinner with her. So I didn't see any strength when my mother never made it that strength. And I'm not saying people ought to make whatever values they want. I am saying is let's not act like all of us have not had people in our families.
That's right.
That's right. You got a big cousin who's still your cousin. And the first day you before I knew my sister, the first day person, I knew we were playing the organ in Washington Temple. I mean, most required. I mean, come on, let's stop acting like this is something we believe in. Because in many ways, we're imitating those that have imposed prejudgments in society. And I think that the second part of that, once we give legitimacy to them being able to single out a group for violence, then it gives legitimacy for them to do the same with us.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I think that we see that happening over and over again, especially right now. You know, one of the conversations that we have a lot is that authoritarianism isn't coming. It's already here. And if we look at the practices of authoritarianism around the world, they have the same playbook. First, they try to come after education. They don't want an educated public. And then second, they try to undermine and single out segments of the community to reduce their civil rights and protections, usually starting with women, with people, with folks who are in same gender loving couples, and with people of color. And if I look at what this, I don't even know if I can call it an administration anymore, this regime has done, it is exactly that. So I think we have to be clear that an assault on one of us is an assault on all of us. And anything can happen. If it happens to one group, it can happen to you next. So that's, I think, the urgency of this moment. And then when we think about the size of the community, I think that's important too, right? Right now, 30% of Generation Z identify as a member of the LGBTQ+ community, 1 in 10 of every adult. So when we're talking about the size of this community, it is not small and fractional. To your point, everyone in here either knows a person that's gay or maybe is a person that's gay, right? But we are integral to this community. And I think that it's an opportunity for us to not only engage with people who don't know enough about our community to bring it in, especially folks who should be allies like within the Black community, but it's also a time for us to engage in the difficult conversations where we may have differences. If I think about the last election cycle, I think the thing that went wrong, one of the things that went wrong to me is we weren't hearing people about their experiences, right? People would say, you know, the economy sucks, and they say, no, it doesn't. Look at this jobs report, you're doing fine. And I think when it comes to the issues that folks are experiencing, whether it's not knowing a trans person and thus lacking empathy for them, or having real questions about sports and fairness, let's talk about it and not avoid it. Because this is an opportunity for us to build a deep alliance that cannot be broken, because at the end of the day, I know one thing is sure, and two things for certain, there's no one that's affiliated with Donald Trump in that White House that wants anything good for me or anyone else in this. Right. That is the key.
And we've also had giants in our community that had to face homophobia in our community. Violence.
Yes.
Who organized the march on election in '63. And Dr. King told me, got to stay away from him and play a low key role because he was gay. Jimmy Paul, some of my brothers and the folk being born in books. So I think that it is an open discussion. And I don't think it's a difficult discussion. I think it's a discussion that if we just be honest with each other, we can have. What has human rights done to reach out to the Black church community, the civil rights community, other communities that are other tribes in our community to try and work a coalition based on that?
Yeah, I was just actually getting on in Atlanta, Georgia. We went on this thing from the American Dream Tour. And really the purpose was, as we were experiencing all the impact of this terrible administration, trying to understand and tell the story of reality of LGBTQ plus people's lives. But let me tell you, it is worse than you might think, right? Like I talked to a teacher in the South who was living with HIV, and he said he had to choose paying for his next medication or paying for his next meal. I talked to a veteran who had served this country for 17 years with honor, only to be kicked out of the military and denied the opportunity to end her service in her uniform simply because she is trans. Those are the stories that we're hearing every day that we have to speak life into to make people understand that what we're seeing when it comes to hundreds of bad bills against our community, what we're seeing when it comes to the 1 in 5 of every hate crime is motivated by anti-LGBTQ plus bias, the way that it lands is real people struggling every single day. But as part of that tour, we went to the Vision Church in Atlanta, Georgia, who is pastored by the Bishop O.C. Emmer, phenomenal if you don't know him. We also partnered with an organization called STEFAN, the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, to really talk about ways that we can not avoid the conversation, but lean into it in Black communities to build the allegiances and power that we need. And that was a time when we got to stop allowing the idea that people of faith are not also people who care about everyone having civil rights, including my community. We got to let that go a little bit. And as part of the conversation of faith, for me at least, is also about restoring a civic faith. Because I feel like what we are asking people to do right now, whether you grew up in the church or not, whether you come on Easter or you go every Sunday, we're asking people in a political context to do the same thing. To believe, to have an unrelenting belief in the power that we have as people when we work together. To believe that we can manifest a world that we've never seen, felt, or experienced before, but we can make it happen collectively. So I say that because the conversation within the church, to me, is actually about a greater call to restore a sense of civic faith for the nation that can allow us to get past this dark moment.
Now, how do we mobilize cross-fertilize our efforts in terms of mobilization of voting rights and voter turnout in this next election? How do we connect? I went intentionally at the invitation to march on the front line with the No Kings March to show that we would work with different other communities, because it was all mostly white organized. I ended up on the front line with Robert De Niro. And how do we start threading these coalitions more effectively? Because it has to be intentional. It's not going to just fall into each other. We need to be intentional. What are the steps you think we need to take?
Well, I think really nice And I think right now, finding ways for us to put some wins on the board together is a great opportunity. For me, one of the places where I saw some incredible coalition work happening was in Virginia this last year. When the people came together and elected Abigail Spanberger as the first woman to be the governor of the United States of Virginia. Incredible work. But to do that, you have folks coming together across economic justice, faith communities coming together, the LGBTQ plus community, immigrant rights community, environmental justice community folks. And we found a way to access them in together. So I think, yeah, there's a broader world where everyone has competing interests and a limited time to give to every single effort. But when we can find ways to come together and put real wins on the board, I think that makes a difference. And right now, when I'm thinking about what we've got to do this year, the most important thing that we can do is make sure that all of us show up and vote this November. Full stop and period. We've got to. And I don't care what it takes to motivate folks, but they need to be hearing from us every single day to make sure that that happens. Because the things that can result in the power that we have in rooms like this across the country, not being realized in the power that we need in the places where decisions about our lives are taking place, is if we don't turn out. That is the difference.
And I think that all of us need to collectively and in our silos push that message, because all of us are being exploited, oppressed, denied by the same force. And Trump is serious. They have in a year overturned DI. In a year, they just about closed down the Department of Education. I like your opening statement. We're not headed to authoritarianism. We're there. Have you ever heard of them stacking the Supreme Court and the president goes and sit in the Supreme Court to try and intimidate them to go his way? And if that's not authoritarian, I don't know what it is. We're in Iran right now with U.S. military and don't know why we're there. I mean, we've been wrong in wars before, but at least we knew why we were wrong. We didn't know why we were wrong. And he's selling wolf tickets every day.
No, you got to bring it down now. I'm waiting for you. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going.
And I think at least
You're still on my camera shot.
you can get this.
The opportunity for me is that the bar is raised, right? So I think there's a world coming when we have folks in office, when we got, I'm gonna say a Democratic majority, when we got people that care about our civil rights and our lives. But I think even for them, we gotta raise the bar of expectation. There's been too long where we've been asked to protect a democratic system that hasn't been working for us. So with full expectation, we gotta talk about terms limits in the United States. They're good, I mean, register to vote, just out of the period, but the bar is raised. I think there's actually an opportunity to make sure, in the midst of this crisis, that for once this country lives up to its promise to us, to all of us. If there's ever been a moment to demand that, it is right now.
All right, get on here and bring it around. Get on here. All right. We're going to deal, we're on the next time. One of the privileges is dealing with maternal health in our community. And that network has began working with making sure that women's maternal health is done in a way that reaches us on the ground in our community. Too many things are done at such an elevated level that it never reaches the ground. of where our community is. CPS, we're trying to revamp and do things on local levels, work in partnership with NASDAQ Network, and I wanted to now, the ladies, and I want all my journalists to bring it back. Then, we're going to bring in a lot of us talk about F3, knowing the work on the board of U.S. Senator Ruben Gabriel. And he'll be here right after this now. Let's talk about all of this. So bring on that CEO back. Come on, get on here.
Yeah.
All right. Right after. But I wonder, we are entering this partnership with CBS as an organization. And Marilyn Strickland, who is the United States Senator from the state of Washington. And she is going to moderate. She's just in a women's luncheon. She got serious praise by Ayanna Preston. And she's done my show about Nation. And we're honored to have her with us. Give her a hand to her.
Opportunity to be here today. The name of this session is Love Delivered, a conversation about Black maternal mortality. And you will hear from a very distinguished panel of experts about everything ranging from healthcare, lived experience, and the systems in which we operate. But I would be remiss if I did not point out an absolute truth about what it's like to be a Black woman in America in 2026. We live in a system where everything we do is policed. The tone of our voice, how we wear our hair, the way our bodies are shaped, and even how people perceive us at the workplace. Does she have an attitude? Is she angry? All that in a system that often has double standards. While we watch people who may not look like us engage in the exact same behavior, that they get promoted, they get advanced, there is no punishment for it. As we look at this panel today, though, I first want to thank CBS for their sponsorship. I want to thank the mighty Reverend Al Sharpton for always centering Black women and all the work that he does. And just for creating this, and of course, I want to thank Bernicia Pinder, who's Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Belonging at CPS Health, for moderating this panel. Now, you will hear about a lot of topics from insurance companies, fragmented care, who actually works in the healthcare system, and why we may or may not trust it. There should also be a conversation about the perception of Black women as strong and fierce and tough, which is what we are, but also how that affects the way the medical system manages our pain. Prescriptions we may be denied, the type of care we may not get. And when I talk about the strong Black woman narrative, I sometimes sadly think to myself, the fierce independence and restraint is often the result of how we've been treated and our inability to rely on government systems. I also talk about the fact that we are resilient and we will always persevere. Black mothers and babies have some of the highest rates of mortality and morbidity across the country. And even before Black women become pregnant, there are comorbidities that exist. Diabetes, high blood pressure, health challenges even before you get pregnant. Not getting the type of prenatal care that you deserve. And again, a system that doesn't always make us feel as though we're belonging. Black moms in the United States are dying at 3 to 4 times the rate of their white counterparts, other women of color. 1 in 5 Black women are not receiving adequate prenatal care compared to only 1 of 10 white women. And even in my home state of Washington, 25% of Black mothers in Washington do not receive adequate care. Now, as a member of Congress, I am proud that we have made this a priority in Congressional Black Caucus. In the past 3 years, we have secured over $200 million in new maternal health funding, but we know there is so much more to do. We've made critical investments in social determinants of health, like housing, where you live, education, and of course, transportation and the healthcare system. We've extended eligibility for WIC so that postpartum and breastfeeding periods are something that Black mothers can do well. And then funding to community-based organizations that are working to improve maternal health outcomes. As we look at what else we can do, I'm excited to hear what this panel will discuss. But I do want to talk about one thing as well. This administration has been on an anti-Black tear. They have fired people. Black women have disproportionately been affected and unemployed. They are trying to erase our history, our stories, and even by eliminating the Department of Education, you are having an impact on Black economic security and outcomes for healthcare for Black women. So I look forward to this panel. Please know that we are fighting every day with the Congressional Black Caucus to ensure that we are standing up for women, for Black maternal health care. I thank you so much for being here, and I want to give a shout out to the 92% of Black women who always know the assignment on election day. Thank you so much.
Representative for the main powerful opening remarks. So, what Representative Strickland has laid out to all of you are the facts. You've heard the numbers, but what they don't show is how early these risks for Black women begin, how quiet the system is the chance to intervene. Maternal health isn't a single event, it's a continuum. Before pregnancy, during pregnancy, and long after delivery. Now, I want to share that I'm here in a dual capacity today. I'm not only moderating this discussion, but I'm also here to share my story. So I invite you all to join me on this journey along with my esteemed panelists. And I'm joined today by Chiamaka. It's a brigade. Dr. Shirley Abraham, Janelle Portia-Albert, and Ethel Isaac Williams. And we had plenty of time to get acquainted before this. We've already solved tons of problems. I'm really excited about this conversation that we're going to have today. So before we begin, I'm going to just give you a set the stage. So how many mothers do we have in the audience? By show of hands. How many fathers do we have in the audience? Because this is not just a conversation about moms. It's about support systems. It's about maternal health and the community. So I'm going to tell you a little story. So I had my first daughter at the age of 19. I was, single. But I was working full time, I was employed, I had private insurance through a really good health insurance carrier, and I still experienced some challenges. I remember going through the early stages of pregnancy, experiencing severe nausea for the entire 9 months. I remember visiting my carefully selected OBGYN who told me pregnancy is not a disease. How many of you have ever heard that? Or you say, pregnancy is not a disease, get over it, get yourself together, you can deal with it.
Yeah.
Only to be seen in the ER later that day for severe dehydration, very, very sick. By that exact same doctor that had said that there was actually something very wrong. So let me kick the panel off by getting to this thing that we don't really talk about. There's this misperception, I think, that Black women don't think about pregnancy until after they get pregnant. And that's not really the case. We actually do plan to have children. And so I want to start again off by asking the question, what should women, especially Black women, be screened for before pregnancy? And how can we help sort of have that conversation before we even get to the place of needing to do believe for the symptoms that we present? And I'm going to direct the question to Dr. Abraham.
My background is an endocrinologist, so I work with diabetes, and it's one of the most common chronic conditions that faces our community. So definitely want to have preconception counseling, meaning having a discussion with your provider about any chronic conditions that could be there. Getting blood sugar checked, an A1C test, which is a 3-month blood sugar test to see if you're in the pre-diabetes or diabetes range. Also checking blood pressure and other metabolic parameters. These are all things that don't have any symptoms, but having that information can inform the type of care you can have, the actions you can take, and the types of medications that can be used that can be safe if you're thinking about pregnancy, and to get the targets all to normal levels, not just controlled, but to normal levels before even thinking about getting pregnant. Because when women are pregnant, they're already in their first trimester and the fetus is already forming organs, and all of those things directly impact the mother and the fetus. So it's really important to have that conversation early on. Some people think that it might affect their fertility, but it goes beyond that. And also the types of frequency and the parameters they should be checking, talking to their family members, seeing what other medical conditions are there, and just really as providers offering that universal screening for everyone, opening up that conversation so it's not just for particular individuals, but for everyone really to have that conversation even before they're thinking about planning for conception.
That's what I'm
I just want to emphasize how important preconception is. It needed how we're gonna try and so it's questions I really encourage patients to have when I myself have that conversation. What are you thinking for the board or your pregnancy, and what are we gonna do about it? So at the beginning of that information gathering, at the beginning of that planning, what are we do for prevention? How are we gonna monitor you differently throughout the pregnancy, and what are we gonna be able to look out for?
Now, as president of the meetings, you all have a relationship and a community with partnerships, and so I'm going to ask you, how do community organizations reach women, but long for the maternal care begins?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for being here. I am not a physician, I'm a lawyer by training. The hat that I wear, I have the privilege of leading over 17,000 women of African descent that are throughout the US and 41 states. And so I give you that backdrop because we're all about service. We were founded on the tenets of friendship and service. And so we have as part of our mantra that we must go where others may not want to go. We must serve those, the least of these, those that are in the community, because we need to do that trusted voice. So regardless of whether you are part of an organized group of women, like the Links, or like Jack and Jill, or like sorority, or even in your church. It's important that as Black women, we're already the mother of civilization.
All right.
We're already victims. So therefore, we have a duty and a responsibility to make sure that we are transferring knowledge and power. And I think one of the things that the main thing as it relates to maternal health, it starts at the very beginning of just overall wellness. And so you've got to be healthy and well, mind, body, and spirit. And we forget sometimes to talk about mental health, oral health, right? It's important to go and see the dentist. So as we are out there taking care of husbands, grandparents, parents, children, many of us we are kind of sandwiched in, we're that sandwich generation, that we are still raising kids, but we're also taking care of the elderly. And that's okay, because that's who we are as a people. That's how we got through the middle passage. We come from the DNA that said we leave no one.
So in our respective roles, and guess what, if you're on the committee, be a committee of one. When you see that young girl, don't judge her. When you see that mother that has a hip baby and a knee baby, don't judge her. In fact, put your credit card down and say, I got your bill today.
Right.
And if you can't do that, make sure they're getting water. But knowledge is how it starts making sure we're focused on the total wellness of the we take care of everybody, and we forget to go get our own. We don't go see the doctor, because you know, we had to take John, we had to take our husband, we had to, the list is long.
Right.
But self-care is not selfish. Self-care is absolutely critical for us in life, so it starts there.
That's right. That's right. Years ago, and my story was 29 years ago. My daughter was 29 now. And yet, 29 years later, we are still talking about this issue. So very, very well said. Greetings, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Chanel. We're the founder of Ancient Song. We're a international and national birth and reproductive health organization. And I want to start, and I'm going to say this first as a mother of 6 children. Yeah, that's my resume right there. And someone who runs a community-based organization. We have hubs, 2 major hubs in New York, right here in Brooklyn, and we also have offices in New Jersey, and have done work globally in the Caribbean and throughout the continent of Africa. And I think most importantly is meeting people where they are and where we expect them to be. Ancient Song started in my home. It started with the desire to want to create something that is like, at the time when we had my first child, who is now 17 years old and about to go off to college, I had private insurance. I had access to equitable healthcare. I had a wonderful home birth with a Black midwife and a Black doula. And it was the most beautiful experience I had ever had in my entire life. And then I took a doula training with Mama Shafia Monroe, and I have to mention her because she is the first woman to create the International Center for Traditional Childbearing. And it was an organization, yes, if you know about it, clap about it. But it's an organization that was founded on the principles of creating a strategic plan for addressing maternal mortality and morbidity. And this happened back in the 90s when there wasn't even conversations about Black maternal mortality. Right, there weren't conversations about Black maternal mortality and morbidity. And you know, I took a doula training and I started to serve folks who were on Medicaid, low income, and noticeable ways in which our infrastructure in and of itself doesn't serve anyone. We have insurance segregation, we are faced with safety net hospital issues, we are under-resourced in our communities. We have doctors who have great intentions, but who end up leaving because they're not being supported in the care that they're trying to provide. And we have a lack of parity in the workforce where we could have a very robust infrastructure. And so when we talk about like how should someone prepare when they're thinking about having a baby, that's kind of hard when you see what's going on in the world, right? In 2026, we have had so many advances as people of African descent, and all of those things are strategically being pulled back. There's a concerted effort to destabilize our communities. There is a concerted effort to destabilize our professionals who are working within healthcare, midwives, nurses, OBs. If we look at the amount of professionals that are, Black professionals that are in those spaces, they have been strategically pushed out in various different ways. And so when I'm talking to someone about getting pregnant, and their reality is, well, where am I supposed to give birth? What place is safe for me? Or if someone's asking me, should I get a medical proxy before I even go into a birth room? That shows me that there is a dire need for an overhaul of the way in which we can treat people to begin with. Right. Because you can't think about an episode of pregnancy and being pregnant if you don't have the necessary supports in place as a whole. And so this is where us as a community, where we come in to fill the gap. And so as community-based organizations who are working in the maternal health field, we are
actively and continuously actively working to get people where they are. We're going to churches, we're going to nail salon, we're creating mutual aid. We are building up the perinatal workforce. There are midwives in Florida who have created midwifery schools if you want to go into a healthcare profession. We're going into high schools to talk to young people. And so I think a lot of it is really about us recapturing the essence of how we used to organize back in the day, right? And then but incorporating that with the new tools that we have so that people can feel like, oh, I want to have it. Because right now people are afraid to have children.
Yes, let's give her a better. Absolutely. So I want to move us in a different direction now. So when you think about, we're at a place where now we got ourselves educated pre-pregnancy, we kind of know the questions to ask, we know to use our voice, and prepare a plan. And as I alluded to, even in the face of doing that, sometimes things just feel left. And we know even with the best laid plans, particularly in pregnancy, you just can't predict the things that will happen. And so I share my story. I'm sure others in the audience have similar stories of symptoms and things that are persistent. Speak to your provider, maybe you felt like you weren't being listened to, or maybe the infrastructure didn't allow the provider to listen to you. So I want to ask the question, what should happen when symptoms are resolved? Like when someone presents with something that they may not be able to explain, like what should happen?
So my background is actually I've shared before, I'm I work in the Women's Hospital in Boston, and also on the system side, I work as an associate director of maternal infant health equity. Really thinking from both the drug clinicians but also from the system of how we can really address these issues. My thing that I say all the time is when someone's coming back a second, a third, a fourth time with the same concern, it's a sign that what we're doing isn't working and we need to do something different. And so it really is that conversation about what are we concerned about, what are the things I'm worried about, what are the things the patients worry about, and bringing in support folks, so partners, family members, mothers, who are really are supporting our patients, what's really going on here. And think about what are all the different strategies that we can use to still address this concern, and what's our escalation plan, and what are we ultimately trying to prevent. So if we're going to try this now, this doesn't work, what's the next step? So always having that forward-thinking conversation and planning and really hearing the concern and always having a response for the concern. And sometimes it is, I'm not sure what's happening right now, but here's how we're going to get to a solution together.
Yeah, and Julie, I know that we were prepping for this conversation, you were talking about this, particularly through the lens of your roles as endocrinologist and diabetes, so I'd love to hear your perspective as well.
So the diabetes journey definitely is preconception throughout pregnancy and also postpartum, and the symptoms that people feel can vary. And sometimes the symptoms of diabetes, high blood sugar, low blood sugar, can manifest in different ways. So we have to appreciate that there's what someone is telling us and really hear them and keep investigating. And when we don't know the answer, to seek out more help, to seek out more guidance, and to look for other ways of monitoring are they having a side effect of the medication. Do we need to monitor them a little bit further? One of the areas we want to expand is continuous glucose monitoring for women with diabetes during pregnancy to see are we missing some symptoms that are happening when they have high blood sugar, low blood sugar. But just because someone doesn't give a classic symptom doesn't mean that they're not experiencing a serious event. So we always want to investigate further and keep looking.
Yeah, now, I could speak probably for most of the audience, if you have had an experience having an advocate like Chanel who worked at the women's side, you would certainly want one. So I'm really curious to talk about how to do it. Oftentimes, because of things like technology that make your issues, you in the room with your provider. How do you develop a voice to advocate on behalf of yourself when you are presenting a symptom, you're not being listened to, you're not being heard?
Yeah, so I would say, as a doula, our role is to really be able to provide information and to help someone to advocate for themselves, right? And that advocacy looks different for different people, right? It's based on the situation. But a lot of the work that we do happens prior to them even going in the birth room, right? So we're having conversations about what happens when situations escalate. What does it mean for something to be routine? What does it mean for something to be urgent? What does it mean that something that maybe the physician or the midwife is thinking, oh, we need to elevate this to the next step? And so really educating the person that we're working with around what that looks like in different scenarios, having a conversation around that, and then what does it mean for them to center their own book and their model of autonomy? And that can be scary, right? Because when you're going through the process of having a contraction, you're not really thinking about it, right? Your mind is focused on, okay, let me get through this so that I can get to the next one. And so this is where we really rely on support. Right? What is support? What does support look like? What does it mean for your partner to be your advocate? Because your partner knows you best. What does it mean for your family member, whether it's your mother or your grandmother? And it doesn't mean them putting on their views and opinions of what should happen in the room, right? But it's actually listening to the voice of the person who is in labor and giving voice to what it is that they say that they want for themselves. Because so many times, you know, Black women have advocated for themselves in this space, right? We've heard stories about Serena Williams, who has, you know, who said, oh, I'm feeling a chest pain. Or we have mothers who come in where they're, you know, they're having a pregnancy-related complication and they can't necessarily articulate it in a way that someone who is interpreting it is understanding what they're trying to say. But that doesn't diminish the fact that they're experiencing something in that particular moment. So I think from the provider angle, it's up to providers to take a step back and say, wait a minute, what is this person trying to say to me? And give them space to be able to do it. But then also on the patient side, giving them an opportunity to do it in a way that feels good to them, right? If it's a non-emergent situation, you always have time to talk about something. If it's an emergent situation, well, hopefully they've had a conversation with their provider ahead of time to be able to discuss that. But if they haven't, then it's, oh, you know, can you at least let me know what's going on and let my family know what's going on so that we can center ourselves and move forward in a way that we can.
I totally agree. I want to just add to that. You know, sometimes it just comes down to language and understanding. I don't mean whether you're speaking English, French, Spanish. I'm talking about having communication with the provider. And so part of what we're doing when we're out there educating women and men, and I'm so glad to see some women in the room. Men, you view us as the strong queens that we are. Yeah. But water will wear work. So no matter how strong you are, at some point, we all have a break. So we need you to lean in when we say you hurt, when we say you don't feel right. We need you to have that empathetic ear to say, okay, I know she takes care of everybody else, but maybe let me see what I can do to take care of them. Then you're in the room, to the women, when you're in the room with that provider, one of the things that I hope we're doing when we're out there educating women in the community about having voice is to give them the confidence to say, don't leave until you get the answer. If you don't understand, just keep saying, I don't know what you're saying. I don't understand what that means. You know, physicians, lawyers, those of us in our professional lives, we get caught up in jargon and acronyms and big words, and we want to give it to you in a very clinical way. Makes us feel smart. But guess what? If you have not understood what I'm trying to communicate, then you're not going to leave the better for it, and nothing is going to change in your circumstances. So we need women to really feel that confidence that when I speak, I'm going to keep speaking until someone hears. And if you have to keep going back, if you have to find that doula, if you have to find that church, say, come go with me. We have got to bring community back to the community. We are leaving it to somebody else to come and save us, fix us, and no one's coming. No one's coming to save our community, but our community. So we might as well be in this ship and this road together. And I think if we can make sure that we are empowering them to give voice to whatever they're feeling. It's not a right or wrong, but it is a question of, do you hear me? Do you see me?
Definitely, one of the most powerful things about Black women is we never have a problem using our voice for everybody else. But for some reason, when it comes time for us to ask for help, we can't find the words like, hey, the first thing to take from this is Black women, we need to ask for help. It's okay. It's okay that we're not always living on. Because sometimes I know for me personally, going through my journey and my ordeal, I did not ask for help. And what I did was I brought us of the community and the supports that could help to navigate, the challenges of my labor delivery. So what else is into labor delivery because you get to pre-planning, you get to navigating your pregnancy, and then labor delivery. I think you kind of romanticize in your mind what it's going to look like. You have a birthing plan. Your day comes, you're gonna be in labor, you're gonna nails done, everything. So things that not for me, really not. So, I was very, very tiny when I got pregnant. So when I was assessed, the due date that I was given was January the 10th. I actually ended up going into labor in December. And when I went to the hospital, the same provider looked at me and said, no, it's too early. There was no measurement, there was no sonogram, there was no reassessment, there was no dosing of the ground. It's given stop early, and I was sent on my way. So as the days go by, I get to January 9th, like yes, sure I'm gonna go into labor, the 10th comes and goes. I have my follow-up with my OB, and he says, we're gonna induce you on January 24th. January 21st, I woke up in excruciating pain, and that kicked off what was 27 hours of labor to bring my almost 9-pound baby into this world. When she was born completely dry. She had green meconium staining on her arm, and 6 hours after she was born, I changed her diaper in the hospital to find it full of what appeared to be blood. Oh no. I wheeled her down to the nursery. And I go back, they tell me to go back to bed. What was I supposed to do? I just had a 9-pound baby, 6 hours ago, I was tired. I ended up going back maybe a little while later to find them putting her on a gurney to put her in a helicopter to send her to Johns Hopkins. Now, what I later found out when she got to NICU was that she was born severely postpartum, that the placenta had broken down, there was no amniotic fluid, and she was actually just the placenta for her to finally stay in my womb. I really want to ask the panel because at that point, instead of reassessing, it was just sort of, I've seen this before, this is what I know, you're not in labor, we're going to stop it, go home. But I want to ask the panel, when should her and what is the right thing to do? When should you kind of throw up the norm to the wind and actually think about it?
Yeah, I think the answer is all the time. And there are a few things that have to be protocolized, like sure, the dose of the medication and how it's given, but standard care guidelines are what they are and are there to guide care and to provide a certain standard of care. But we always have to think about the person in front of us and their individual context and what's going on. And so I really try to have this idea of shared decision making about every decision about parents. And share what my concerns are and what sort of the risk benefit trade-offs that I see in each option going forward, and then working with the patient to do the same. Sharing what their values are, what's important to them, and then coming up with a shared decision. And sometimes we balance the risk, we weigh those risks and benefits and maybe come to different conclusions, and that's okay as long as we have that open conversation with all the facts on the table and it's an informed choice. And then if I recommend option A and then we should choose option B, that's okay too. We just have to think about how do we do that safely moving forward. So I think those values of shared decision making, open conversations around risk benefit trade-offs. But in order to do that, you have to feel safe. You have to feel like you trust your provider, and it's our job to create spaces that feel that way. And constantly reassessing what is going to be our next benchmark to reassess the trade-offs here, risk benefits of all of our options, and have an opportunity to take a different course of action when necessary and appropriate.
And so I want to move us along One of the things we learned, not only to one month of our time, they kind of had fun, and this is such a great conversation. But I want to get to a part that I don't think we talk about enough, which is what happens after they leave and mental health. I know from personal experience, the labor delivery wasn't the most traumatic piece, it was the aftermath, and so because of what I went through, I ended up with PTSD, postpartum depression, and ended up having to choose between nursing my daughter and paying for her. I was also at work, I made too much money, so I could not get any assistance. And so I really want the panel to spend some time kind of diving into the postpartum journey, mental health. We don't talk about it enough. Yeah, it goes back to the strong Black woman, sentiment. But how do we stop forcing people to trade off between their mental health, taking care of their child, and getting the support that they need?
Yeah, so one of the organizations that I've been seeing like very closely listening, I said, and it's the March of Dimes. And we actually have a partnership with them that started in 2020. We were all COVID. And the president, our national president at that time, saw that there was still a need or a president that was going to reach people where they are. Behind the mask, behind the closed doors. And so WAM stands for Let's Aid Mothers to Be Strong. And it's about educating them about all the resources, linking them to doers and other places where they can find help. If you don't have that strong primary care physician going in, strong OB/GYN going in, chances are it's not going to get better after pregnancy and after delivery. So one of the things that we have to do as a collective community is recognize the signs of stress. You see mothers of all ages. You see that tension point rise to the point where they're about to break income, right? And sometimes we want to just dismiss it and say they should know better. And why are they doing that to them? That mother may be going through her own crisis that we just dismiss. So mental health, starts again with that self-care. And if they've never been taught or shown, and they don't have that relationship with the provider, where do they go? So I think the more we talk about mental health in general, and not, we can tie it to any disease or condition, but it really is a part of that wellness. You really do need to be well in mind, spirit, and body. Come on, and so therefore, I think that's where our faith base comes into right? Sometimes everybody, we're not monolithic, but there's still one Lord, one faith, one baptism in a very general sense, right? So if you don't have that, where do you get that? Where do you get that center? And we use that word a lot. And I love that word because it's about honing in on what brings you that energy. But our community is broken. Our nation is broken. So if our families and our communities, it's sometimes hard to see our way to a clear path and to a path that gives us peace. But I dare say that if we are honest with ourselves, all of us have been there at some point in time. And so when a mother is coming through trauma, right? Because pregnancy is not just about that moment of delivery, it's before, it's during, and then it's after. And I think that's the question. How do we support the after when the children are here? How does our nation, how do our communities support the children once they're here? Well, that's a whole nother family system.
Yeah, I wanted to just add to that postpartum is forever. And I think a lot of times we think about postpartum through this lens of it's only 6 weeks. And postpartum isn't just 6 weeks. Postpartum lasts for as long as you have given birth to a child, then you are in postpartum. I mean, you have children. Then you are currently in postpartum. I don't care if your child is 1 month old or 50 years old. You are in postpartum. You are in the postpartum period. It's important to know that, right? It's important for that to be recognized because as we go through, as women, as we go through the postpartum period, we are experiencing different things. And, as Ethel mentioned, it's about recognizing those signs. So when a woman says it is what it is, or when we use a complete sentence and it's okay. When a black woman says okay, she has reached a precipice, okay, of frustration. When I say, okay, all right, right, you know that I have now reached a point where I am completely frustrated. I might be overstimulated, right? I might be stressed. We're thinking about what does it mean for us? It's easy to say 17 years old. It's easy for us to say like wellness and all of those things. But if you don't have the necessary infrastructure in space, or you don't feel safe seeking those things out, it doesn't make any sense. Like the reality is that me as a black woman, as a mother of 6 children, there are times where I'm afraid to take my child to the doctors. I'm afraid to say that I may have a mental health issue, or I might be afraid to express that I'm stressed out. Not because I don't want to say something, but every time that we as black women have done that, it's been used against us. That is not a real conversation. So it's not that we don't want the help. It's that when we have traditionally sought out the help and infrastructure that are currently in place, they have not been friendly to us. Either they are not listening to you, right? Or they are using that to take your children away from you. They are using that. We want to lead into the water, we want to lead into the black man, but then they're also criminalizing him. Yeah. We're standing up for his own family. So now you have a dehumanization and an demasculinization of the black man who is just trying to take care of his family. Well, and you also have the black woman who is now put into a place where she has to make a choice. Now I gotta make a choice. I have to make a choice between us as a family unit, my own self-preservation, and that of my children. And what will a black woman do? She will always put her children first. Every single time. So it's important for us that as family and as community, and when I say family, I mean our larger family. Us living an individualized life is not us. Us having ego is not us. Us working together, checking in on one another. I'll never forget, and I'll make it real quick. When I moved, I had 4 young children. I got stair steps. My oldest is 17. I have a 17-year-old son. I have 6-year-old twin daughters. I have a 6-year-old daughter. I have a 9-year-old daughter, and I have an 8-year-old son. Yes, and go ahead. But I remember that when I had my first tour, there was an older couple on the block. And that older couple, every time they went to the store, they brought us food. Every single time, right? And it's not because we couldn't afford to get food or anything, but they were like, Chad, you got 1 kid, so we're gonna get you some. Right? It's about community, it's about us looking out for each other, it's about us, every child is your child. Every mother is somebody's mother. And so the only way that we can center mental health is for us to lean in, caring into one another, and centering a place where we all can feel comfortable.
All right. So this is amazing information today, and albeit not really enough time to cover everything that we need to cover, that's intentional because this is a conversation that should not stop here. It's a conversation that we need to continue long beyond the demographic. So quickly ground us in a couple of things. Call to action. 1, we need to start earlier. We need to protect maternal health before pregnancy through screening, planning, funding upstream. If you're a provider or a family member, listen the first time. Build in advocacy. We heard a lot about community, we heard a lot about support here. Stay after birth. Postpartum is not the end, as she mentioned. We are all of us mothers are still in postpartum. And then use your power, use your voice. Look, the world is not kind to our babies once they get here. And so it is a collective requirement for all of us to make sure that their journey into the world does not begin like trauma. So thank you all. Thank you.
I know this been super. We're excited about working on this issue. We're not going into this issue on our Black maternal health issues. As I said, I want to get into the real fight around distraction from the Epstein file. And I feel that a lot of what we are seeing is Trump trying to flood us on so that we will not get down to the real nitty gritty. And so I want to talk to Senator Gallego on that as well as what's going on now. Then we're going to have our tech guy. I really want to hear this because AI is here to stay. So how do we deal with it? And then we're going to have John Hope Brian talk about how we do our money. So we got excited ways before we do our 90s gala tonight, dance tonight, whatever we talk about. Some folks don't have to go and change to the 90s. Some have to address like you were. I ain't picking on nobody. He is a Marine veteran, serves on the Senate Committee on Veteran Affairs and Banking, and is the ranking member of the Energy Subcommittee, and he's been one of the most vocal advocates for the complete release of the Epstein files. He's also been a champion on housing affordability. Let's welcome Senator Ruben Gallego from Arizona. Senator, let's start with something that is a deep concern to me and a lot of our delegates from around the country. And you have a chapter in Phoenix, by the way. Let me throw up this list.
Represent, man, you represent.
The FC file. The feeling I have, you know, sometimes things are in your head that you can't really see or smell. I'm a little funny. My brain back here, my eyes here, my nose here, so I can think of things before I can see them and smell them. And some of my brain tells me that a lot of this drama we're seeing is to flood the zone so we will not get back to the Epstein file. So one day we Venezuela, the next day we're going to Cuba, then we're going to Greenland, now I mean, what are you going to get Epstein? You've been made with God saying that. Tell us what you think is happening here and whether or not you think we will ever successfully get to the bottom. But we have to talk about, I mean, we have this, you know, run around standard. We talk about that people can literally violate children. And we normalize that. I mean, this is a threat to who we are.
Yeah, the perpetrators are still alive. It's not like this something happened 8 years ago, we're discovering it all dead. These guys are around. They're walking on New York City. They're the most powerful men in the country. They're in cahoots with the president of the United States, one way or the other, whether he's involved, well, I mean, look, I'm involved without a doubt. But what we're seeing right now, I think the scariest part for me is the fact that these guys are still around. If they were victimizing young girls, they were raping women and girls 10, 15 years ago, when makes you think they stopped? So this is why it's very urgent that, everyone leads and pushes, because these guys are out there, they're still very powerful, there's no accountability, they can still be covered. Now, coming from a Latino background, looking at, things in Arizona, and I'm sure they got to review this, like, what happens when powerful men are unaccountable, right? In Arizona, what we see, for example, is, Black women, Latino women, and Indigenous women, they're always coming up with an excuse why they we shouldn't worry about them when they go missing. Because in order for us to care about them, they have to be perfect. And it scares me that now you have a whole generation of very, very rich and poor men right now that are kind of setting a standard for the rest of the country of what they can do without accountability. And guess what's going to happen in the future? Who do you think that's going to affect the most going forward? It's going to be the Black, brown, Indigenous communities, because that's what tradition has happened in the past.
What are you hearing from Republican colleagues? Are they even privately ashamed of their age?
No, I mean, it's like it's did stop, did everything they can get, because they know that they are going to end up holding, potentially, I hope that's true, the responsibility for covering up for some of these worst men that have portrayed some of the worst crimes in history. And so instead of taking real power, and I give some credit, for example, Max from Kentucky, who's really stepped up and had 1 or 2 senators, but as a whole, I think you should do a really good statement on the Republican Party that they can't all come together and agree that child molestation, child rape, exploitation is something that they should all universally stand against. And you do not see any of that. You do not see that. And not only that, again, what is the real danger is that this becomes the acceptable norm. If that becomes acceptable norm, it's our communities end up being the victims in the end.
Let's talk about some of the issues facing the country. As I just said in the chapter in Phoenix. And people are saying to me that the affordability issue is even worse in Black and brown communities. And they're losing half their paycheck. How do we deal with the question of affordability and the fact that it is even disproportionately an issue in communities of color? Because we knocked out DEI, so there's not even a real prescribed formula to equalize what has been legally made possible for us to be unequal in the first place.
Yeah, and so I live right now in South Beach, which is kind of the traditional Black and Latino neighborhood, and it was a very affordable place to live. But even now, what we're seeing is that generationally speaking, some of the Black and Latino families that are there can't have their kids live nearby, right? And it's really scary to have. And there's a couple other problems here. Maybe it's not the case everywhere else, but at least in Arizona, when it comes to the working class, Black and Latinos were always the first to fire and the last to hire in common with us, right? And then that affects our credit. And we already have, unfortunately, discriminatory credit practices. And so when we start getting a situation right now, where the average home, I can't figure out, American economy is $500,000 to begin with. The wages of a Black and Latino family are usually 15% less in Arizona. Our credit is worse, and now we're just basically priced out. And then we can do with rents. Rent is just, killing a student, because what happens is very simply they haven't expanded one of the most very important things to be helpful is housing costs. And we keep growing as a state, and we still don't get the support we need. So I'm doing a lot of work, in the Senate to try to bring that to make housing more cheap, more housing online as fast as possible. But we need to move fast. We need to also understand there still is housing discrimination, whether it's on the mortgage side, on the realtor side, on the private, we try to do a home equity refi. It's still there, and that's adding all that up makes it very difficult, especially in a very hard environment, when your mortgage is at 6.8%.
Let me bring something to your particular word. You are the increment of energy. And when we deal with the energy self-living, let's talk about these Black families that we're looking at a time when electricity bills are going up, that data centers getting built. And AI is bringing a lot of our community, whereas we're seeing input to try and regulate it in a fair way, or see these same entities trying somehow cushion the affordability question. That if they set up a power plant in the neighborhood, it hurts our neighborhood.
So there's a couple of things, right? So we gotta deal with the economic justice and kind of environmental justice side of it. Where they're gonna end up putting data centers is where they have the least amount of resistance. And then they end up putting it, expecting the data system to run proper and problematic neighborhoods. Because a lot of these data centers have zero zoning or regulation. You certainly have that in Arizona. You're seeing data centers go to these areas that already have a high amount of and these data centers will, not just make noise pollution, but they will actually give off pollution to heat pollution, things of that nature. So number one, data centers should go to the right place. They need to also be abiding by, some of the regulations that's, will stop or usually happen in our communities where they end up putting the trash compactors, the generators, everything else like that into areas of working class areas. But it's also when it comes to, electricity generation, they gotta pay their way. We shouldn't be paying the bill for AI, right? AI should be producing their energy. Number two, it is kind of insulting in this regard because at this point, I haven't really seen the AI companies do anything to make sure that Black and Brown communities benefit from the wealth that's going to be created from AI. We're then going to be skipped over the generational wealth that was created under the internet, which is often in certain areas. We missed the generational wealth that came from housing boom, and hopefully we can turn that around. But now they're basically trying to put the data centers in our neighborhoods, to improve our neighborhoods, to jack up our rates, so then our kids are going to get jobs. And we end up being displaced and fired. And so all in all, there needs to be a better deal that comes from AI. Right now, we're going to be at the bad end of that deal.
No, and I think that we deal with the inevitability of AI existing in some way. I think that what you're saying sounds to me more feasible, and that is that we need to have a better deal, how to deal with the job, even some of the contracts. I do not see us sitting by and letting them just big footage our communities with no economic benefit to those communities.
Who are the Black contractors they're hiring? Who are the Latino contractors they're hiring? Like, you kind of think about it, there needs to be a kind of version of CRA, so that we have to be invested in communities, not just basically by the corporate. There's a lot of things that they need to address and actually deal with the fact that they're going to be operating in our communities, and they can't just be exploiting these communities and not getting anything in return.
You are one that has been involved in military, you know what's going on, but at the same time, you are of Latino descent. The fight around deportation and ICE. We had an attorney here yesterday for Renee Blue, who was killed on tape in Minneapolis. How are you viewing this deportation issue and what's going on in Arizona and more broadly, how you deal with it now?
Well, so, I have a lot of family still from Chicago too. I'm originally from the south side of Chicago, right here from back in the Arts Prison area, Gage Park area. My godson has to walk around with a passport. In America, third generation American has to walk with a passport because of the racial profiling that ICE is doing. When I went and visited my old this concrete grounds little village, they were describing the way that they were patrolling. And it was the same way that I was patrolling in Iraq. Americans. And if they're doing that openly, what are they doing? Yeah. If they're willing to kill, two middle-class white people on camera running knives to their face, what do you think they're doing to Black and Latino control when there's no camera? And there's no accountability. And that's the root of the law. The secondary problem is that what happens if this is the new law enforcement standard? If the law enforcement standard, now you can wear masks, you don't have to identify yourself. Right now, they're saying you can enter somebody's house without a search warrant if you believe there's suspect somebody is there harboring an illegal alien. What happens when local police starts adopting those standards? Who do you think is going to be on the chopping block at that point? Whose neighborhood is going to be, using those type of military systems? And exactly, black and brown. And so this is why, especially if you've seen, there's a lot of big pushback from black and Latino veterans against this, because we know how this can slip and slide down. And also, we've been in some of the worst situations, in the hardest combat, and have still treated civilians in a way that they respected them and they respected us in return. And so when I saw ICE agents, the way they were operating versus American citizens, I never treated Iraqi civilians that way. Even if they were mean, even if they spat at me, no matter what, I was still professional. The fact that some American thinks that they could treat another American that way should really scare us, because what kind of environment, what kind of leadership, by the way, is telling you that you can do that? That's very dangerous.
And you've had to deal with this in other facets before. I remember coming to Phoenix, fighting Sheriff Arpega, who was making people walk down the street in just their pink underwear, inmates, just flaunting racism. And I've just been a couple of marches out there around that many years ago. You might remember. So I know that Arizona has had to deal with this stuff.
Yeah, no, thank you again for helping us be in that. It was a really tough time for many of y'all. There was a county sheriff, and I wasn't elected. This is actually how I kind of got radicalized into activism. They were, he was essentially racially profiling, black and brown communities. If you were suspected of being illegal, they had to pull you over and detain you into your community system. This isn't a federal government, by the way. This is a local sheriff. And it was the leadership led by Reverend Sharpton and black clergy and Latino leaders plus business community all got together. So this is not acceptable. And we protested, we challenged them at the polls. It took us a while, but we finally pushed them out of office in 2016. And it was a coalition of black, brown, business community, even white moderator who decided this is not how I want my policing to be done, even if I'm not directly affected by it. And it was a precursor to us knowing how we could defeat the Donald Trumps of the world, because we defeated him in 2016. Then in Arizona, we defeated Donald Trump in 2020. And there is a way, and there is a coalition out there of good Americans that do believe in justice, do believe Americans being treated equally, and we need to remember that going into the future election, especially this 2026 election, which is going to be one of the most critical elections in quite a while.
You mentioned 2028. Let's talk about it.
2026.
Oh, I had a request too, but at least I know you were paying attention. Democrats, one of the themes of this convention is that we need to straighten out the tricks in 26 so we can walk through the White House gates in 28. And what, in your judgment, does the Democratic Party, of which you're a member, and the U.S. Senate in that party, what do they need to do more and better in 26? And what candidate needs to represent what going into 28? Being that, Trump will not be on the ballot, we gotta fight Trumpism no matter what happens.
And look, what I saw before, we saw working class Latino men, cross over and go for Donald Trump, and we saw some movement in other demographics. When I went and talked to them, and still do, and I won that year, one of the things they were always talking about is, I want to buy something, I want to build something, I want to own something, I want to feel like someone's fighting for me. I think if we do those four things, then we get the victory. And a lot of times, we get into some really nitty-gritty stuff, and we don't actually reach out to Americans, to working class Americans, and working class means Black and Latino. Tend to forget that. And we don't really offer that economic message directly to them. Like, I'm going to help you not just survive. I want you to get a house. I want you to send your kids to school. I want you to have enough money to take a vacation. I want you to live the American dream that we were all promised, right? And then we need to actually follow through on the actions once we win. Sometimes we don't do that, right? And every day, and this is kind of just like for me growing up, like, you know, I didn't grow up in the best economic situations. When you are in a very bad situation, you just want someone to help and to give you hope. And the Democrats are the party that's going to say, I'm going to help you and I'm going to give you hope for the future. We're going to win. When we don't do that, these voters don't have anyone else to go. So either they don't vote or they'll just go and find anything that makes them feel better, right? So the 2020 candidate can be anything. It could be a rich person, it could be someone from a rich background, they come from any demographic background. But they need to be able to tell somebody, I'm going to give you help and I'm going to give you hope. Because that's how we're going to be able to motivate people to come out in a very nasty, nasty election. You're going to have so much money. You're going to get so many tricks. And the only way we're going to cut through that clutter is to show that we are the party that's going to be here to help and to give you hope.
Do you feel that there is a growing nexus between the Black and brown community to fight on these issues together? One of the things that I've seen in the rallies we've done nationally around deportation is more of us understanding that these issues are not isolated because the same forces that want to make sure somebody doesn't come from Mexico don't want them to come from Haiti and don't want to see them come from Ghana. This president has called Haiti and several African nations SO countries. So we can fantasize that we're separate. We're not. And if you allow ICE to racially profile, any Black from Brooklyn looks like a Black from Haiti walking out. They're going to lock you up and then tell you, all right, prove yourself. So you be there too, who's trying to prove your way out.
Yeah, but I think what I would say for the Black clergy of America, in terms of, at least from my experience with PS, I should say, have been very consistent in terms of maybe pushing back on ICE. And we really have been the opposite. So the Latino community has now come back and recognized that there is coalition there and that there's shared interests and shared threats. And I think for a while, the Latino community kind of thought that they would be exempt from the worst regions of the government open. And now they kind of got, like, woken up. And because of that, I think we're seeing some great political forces. You're seeing some districts in this country, especially like districts that have a good coalition of Black and brown voters voting together in unison, right? And I'm hoping, my people, let's learn the lesson. We do have also a lot of needs in common. Black and Latino families have the lowest amount of home ownership right now. If we don't change the trajectory of the country, specifically because we have so many young families, we're about to create the poorest generation of this country in decades, right? Already, many of our communities miss the love that was created in World War II because of the GI home bill, the VA home bill. Because so many of our families were discriminated, weren't allowed to buy those homes. And now, if we do not do things well when it comes to AI, when it comes to getting us out of this housing slump, when it comes to dealing with this government that is, overly, overtly hard grab when it comes to civil rights, we're going to doom another generation of Black and brown families to poverty and to all the other externalities that come from that. So there is beyond us taking care of making sure that our rights are protected, we still need to make sure that we join together so we actually get the economic future that we have all worked for. Because we're about to go through another phase where we may all either, again, First the fire and the last the hire. And then again, we put ourselves back into a poverty circle that we're all gonna be asking how do we get here? And we just cannot do that.
As Trump has had to deal with, trying to get certain things through, and he's even suggested killing the filibuster. And, there seems so far to be resistance by food and the Republicans, to do that because then they feel that they can face down the road the same outcome. Have you outcome on something that they did not want to get through or get through the majority vote? Have you, heard any mumblings off the record from Republicans, that would lead you to believe that they are going to remain firm and not, in the filibuster?
So far I've seen that there's enough evidence to hold on the filibuster. But let's be clear, they've been trying to find any other way to get to that point without doing it. They've actually done a couple of like backhanded busting the filibuster this year using different process areas like that. The filibuster is always going to benefit conservatives. And we just have to think about it. If we want to push some really good forward-thinking, economic agenda, we're going to have to do the filibuster. When we should have passed the Voting Rights Act in 2022, the Thomas Voting Rights Act, it was a filibuster bill. And look at what we're dealing with now. The Voting Rights Act, Thomas Voting Rights Act had anti-gerrymandering legislation, right? And if it wasn't for the courage of people like Westmore and a couple other governors, Democrats would have essentially been a flagrant minority. If we didn't pass the Voting Rights Act, I doubt that this president would be trying to get rid of the vote by mail, making it harder for the legislature to vote. You can pass, anything that would filibuster. I think we could have had some great programs like childcare, universal health care, all these things that we've been talking about for many years. So it's not my job to make their job easier, so I'm not going to help them get rid of the filibuster. But I'm also certainly not going to be a hypocrite and tell you that I am not going to do my best to make sure to get rid of the future, to pass some necessary agendas that we have. Simple thing, let me tell you something. Federal minimum wage is still $7.25. $7.25. You don't have the filibuster, we passed that. Imagine how many people's lives would have changed if we had actually changed the minimum wage years ago. We'd be lifting people out of poverty instead of listening to this old arcane law that ends up really pushing our agenda back and actually pushing and making Black and brown communities, I think, weaker and less powerful in the long run.
There are those that have been circulating, suggesting you consider running for president. And and you certainly develop a national profile in your actions around deportation and around everything and in general. Have you thought about that?
So I am focused on 2026 first. I'm focused on the 3 babies I have. I have a 10-year-old baby. So you see a little TV out here, which I can get much sleep. But they got a good daycare, right? You can see there, make sure the Democrats do in 2026, and then we'll deal with those questions.
That means you have moved it out.
We're here to talk about 2026.
All right, well, and I agree with you. We're here to talk about that, but the fact that you're here, you have to answer the question.
I'll be here post 2026 to answer any more questions too. Anytime you have me back.
Well, in 27, I invite back the president to Canada.
This guy is stupid. Oh, this guy is stupid. Yeah, that's okay. I think I'm so that.
Some exciting stuff about fantasy. One of the ready to talk to say, now, AI, getting ready to tech now, where they can get into that. We can act all we want. AI is not going anywhere. So we need to find out how we deal with it, how we benefit from it, and what we know about it. But if we say, I would get AI and your child be in the room on AI, and you won't know how your child is coming up with all this stuff. As well as we can deal with it, we can get to this. Yes. About community. So we're gonna do that. Oh boy. We're gonna get into our energy balance. And then as I promised, John Hope Bryant himself will be here as we talk with him about how we build and maintain wealth and build your credit before we go to break. The head of technology and AI is a brother who has pioneered in this area. Came to us several years ago and said, I want to build a tech center under NAD. And we said, all right. He did. 30,000 square feet in Newark. It's operated now for years. He has a tech bus. You can see it's on 16th Center. So it's also done that. Regional. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, good stuff. I know that's right. All right. Day-to-day, computer day-to-day. The computer day. Right, that's the. I think I know how to do it. Yes, good. Excuse me. All right. Yes.
Okay, what is an event? Activité à proximité. Donc, so far, the deal is okay. Donc, 2026, we need to fix all tricks in 2026. So, nous débarquer l'activité, débarquer Haïti, remember, the result, in the chapter, to the party de Haïti. We pas parler. Donc, après, pour what que vous dites exactement, qui ça vous est exactement passé, qui ça vous fait, sur le design. La continuer avec ta malade. Donc, nous allons nous déplacer. Ça, nous allons faire un report pour les. Okay, so we're gonna do that. Fine. What the government and then after the computer, and we are on our way. I was saying, oh, all right, thank you. I want to see next. All right, yeah. Okay, again, all right. So give it back. No, you can go inside right now. Yeah. Yeah, they might be finished. Come back tomorrow and get it back. You have to take some good change here. University. Recording live. Quarter. Let's see that. Okay. That's basically the quarter. The quarter. Scan me the what is the line? Oh, that's the none. Yeah,